I received an invitation from the University of Iowa to make a film about their 2008 International Writers' Symposium on the island of Paros in Greece. I agreed to be among a group of distinguished poets, writers, and novelists discussing homeland for 3 days during the month of May. Meanwhile, the political struggle in Lebanon between two competing sides was escalating day after day as time raced ahead and arrived, catching me unaware. Hurriedly, my ticket was sent from Iowa via a courier, and within days I would have departed to the meeting point in Athens. Yet, on the same day, the political chaos turned into an armed conflict. Militiamen appeared everywhere. Homework I had done for the film had to be swept aside.
Land is your land, and this land is my land.
Woody Guthrie's "This Land Is Your Land" had to be forgotten. The house that Jack built had to be archived. Images of demolished Palestinian homes had to be deleted. Blood spilled on the streets. Children blocked roads and polluted the air. Each side fought for the same homeland, turning it into a warland. The streets became home for the young gunmen who seized the fallen city. Funerals of killed youth followed each other. The army inactively stood by and watched. Friends brought up what was possible for food through empty streets. My home became my shelter. With land, sea, and air traffic shut down, we arranged for a Cypriot cameraman whom I had never met to attend in my place and record the events. I emailed instructions to him, hoping I could make the film without being there. I contemplated how would rough thoughts of homeland pass from one speaker to another and in the process be reshaped. The fighting on the streets eventually died after many horrific days, when the sides agreed for a ceasefire and convened for a national dialogue in another place. Few weeks later, I received this hard disk containing 20+ hours of thoughts, comments, concepts, lunchtime meals, and leisurely strolls that has to fit a 30 minutes time frame.
especially, I was thinking, weirdly American. Maybe America's polluting the world. I thought of this when I heard Artemis say that, because what she said was an American idea, and she's Greek. Every Greek I know does what he did. Says, I don't like my village, but I went there. I can't go to my village. Americans live in a suburb, like Kai. You live in a suburb, it could be here, it could be there, it could be there. It doesn't matter. So we have to make something. And so here we are, a group of writers, and you know, the Greek word for making is poetry. And so that's what I think we're all going to do now. We're going to try to make ourselves an idea of home. As I was swimming with Stephanos and David and Deb and Jennifer and the Turkish Cypriot poets that we had met in Famagusta in the gloriously clear water, not unlike the clarity of the Parian marble, and looking at kilometer upon kilometer of empty high-rises and apartment buildings and hotels, and thinking of the floods of migrations of refugees that we've seen over the last century, that is one of the shaping influences on our life. I turned to a Turkish writer at a certain moment and said, this is so beautiful and this is so awful. So I just want to throw that out as someplace where I'm coming from when I think about home.
For us, the seaside, where for, you know, Americans, you have all the stars and stuff. For us, it's it conjures images of decay and rubbish and dirt, and you know, it's a taboo to say I have my home by the seaside. Then you know, it's like. Ugh.
So you always part of the tribes, but when we become a nation consisting of like more than 50 ethnic groups, speaking more than 300 vernaculars, what can be happen with that kind of home? So I'm searching that home. And in fact, what I have is only hometown. And like what Artemis said, that I would like to carry this hometown in my suitcase. Wherever I'm going to, I just carry that suitcase with me. And when I feel uprooted, I just want to open it and then find it my home. But in fact, it's only imaginary, because when I just remember that hometown, it's just a place where I have my father killed, because he is a suspected communist.
In different settings, I am different people. I mean, I realize that my accent changes in different groups. If I want to be understood, that my mannerisms change in different groups. And I've always thought that each of these persons who come out of me, they are all authentically me. And as I've moved from different countries, I've thought, I've recognized different versions of myself, and the question always is, what version of myself do I like best? And so I'm kind of posing the question, is home where we are authentically ourselves, or is home the place where that version of ourselves, which is always authentic, is the version that we just prefer for some reason?
For me, the physical sense of a home as a place of shelter seems to be a metaphor for the various other types of homes we imagine and we seek. But in the end, I feel a bit small, because the physical home is the most important for me. The reason being the fact that while as writers we can romanticize about various types of homelands, there are at least, I don't know, maybe 2 billion in the world who don't have even the physical home, a physical shelter, I mean, by home. So the physical shelter is as important as the various homes, that when we have the physical shelter, we can seek other homes.
And when I was engaged to a very nice man, a wonderful guy from quite a wealthy family, and one weekend he took me up to this area of open land that his father owned, and he said, this is where we're going to build our house. And he walked around this open field, and he said, you know, this is where our kitchen will be, and there will be a big window that will overlook this, and this is where and you know, I mean, I was sort of going, yeah, he didn't realize, I really think, that he'd never spoken to me about any of this, about what we would do when we graduated from college, about where we would live, and it was sort of like at that moment I realized that I absolutely could not marry this man.
Immediately when I begin to think of home, I not, as the essay says, I not only think about inside the home, I always think about outside the home, because the home does necessarily create two spaces. And there's a way to just always be nostalgic about what's on the inside, how cozy and warm inside is. But I mean, home is always rejecting people. Home is not a democracy. It's not open to everyone. The very definition of a home means that only certain people are in. And I always wonder about those politics of home. Especially because in Jamaica, I'm conscious of who becomes excluded from that home, who does the nation say doesn't belong to them?
People who are from the middle class, especially, or maybe upwardly mobile people, we tend to guard our homes. And in India, if you come, you find that all the homes, especially those who are in what we call housing colonies, you always have to have security, because you don't want to let people come in. And the security is increasing all the time. They have the alarm systems and telephones from the gate so that you can telephone, and so on. The feeling of insecurity that owning a home has created, and this terrible desire to protect our homes.
And thinking about Kaveri's people who've lived on the street, and who've never had a home, whose idea of a home is so different from ours, is it fair to say, or to even ask, if consciousness for them is enough of a home? Or is that muddying the water between the social reality and the literary reality?
To be homeless means for me to not be a citizen, and not to be a full citizen means not to have full access to justice.
I mean, if you go on the ethical level, I mean, talking about homes, etc., what is home for me? I mean, maybe it's exactly for somebody else. And if you're talking about the other people and telling, I mean, the authorities, the people who are in power, I mean, just take this, displace them there, send them away, I mean, take their place and give it to somebody else. Okay. This is inhuman.
It was very wonderful that we have that slash between home and lands in the title of this, because for me it allowed me to think about home figuratively, and land became the concrete way that I could think about this question that we've had posed to us. And I think that's represented very beautifully in David's essay. It almost seems like a slight contradiction, except it's not. It's just our title with a slash in it. When David's son is someone who feels at home in his body, at home in the world, and yet when he tried to plant things in land, in a place, it was later on that he realized that he was always going to be other in the place he wanted to be, perhaps most authentically himself.
Well, responding about the sharing prejudices and about neighbors, I would say like this: neighbors in my country is where you can lend sugar and salt and everything else when you have shortage of all of that. So if I don't have sugar, if I don't have salt, even rice, I can lend all of things to my neighbors. So that is a sharing of values, sharing of materiality. But I would say that neighborhood also becomes a political tool in my country.
The other point that you were talking about the neighborhood, made me think this concept of exile. It's a very strange concept. One is, think of 3 homes. 2 people have lived there since they were born, and the guy in the middle is an exile. On a daily basis, they look exactly the same, but the guy in there is suffering. He might look exactly the same, but for whatever reason, the exile, he just can't handle it. The other people, why is it such a problem that he's living where the other guys have no problem? And one thing that it struck me when we had to do military in Greece, and this, I don't like to bring up the family, but because the family, where I did the military had to be a place that showed no favoritism, because we were a socialist family. So they had to send me to the worst place. And that meant the place where the exiles in the military go to, which is this island in the north called Limnos. And what are the exiles? Drug users, gay, and until the socialists came in, Communist Party members. When the socialists came in, it was drug users, gay, and extreme right-wingers.
The home is the place where you can be most authentically yourself. And I was really taken by it. It said to me, yeah, this is the answer. This is the definition. This is somewhere to stop. But that's the point. It's somewhere to stop, but there's a notion of permanence about it. And I would always feel like saying, this is the place where you can be most authentically yourself for now. There's always the next step, the next move, and the next island, the next journey, the next...
Criticism accepted.
Yeah. There's not a criticism either. It's just, where this leaves us on. I mean, this may be something to do with my own notion of exile, because I've lived most of my life in exile.
What happens when the selves that we hope to be most fully in this place, can't be? What happens, like in the case of when I began to research the history of my family, I saw that my family had this predilection for basically picking up and moving to another continent when they got the crap beat out of them by the latest dictator or the latest general who was making a land grab. They seemed to be always in the way of advancing troops. And so when I began to investigate the history of my family and went back generations, I saw that that maybe this is what they hoped for, that they could make a home where they could be themselves most fully, but that they had to often pick up and make great sacrifices and leave everything behind in order to do it. And what that does is it breeds a tradition of exile and flight, a pattern of flight.
Now the Greeks, for the first time, have to begin imagining themselves too, because the immigrants are forcing them to look at Greece in a different way. Something they didn't have to do for a long time. They perhaps had to do it when your grandparents came over, and whether they were Greek or not, and whether they were dominating homes that they were brought into. But that's an issue now that suddenly the Greeks, I think, have to reimagine what it is to be Greek. They didn't have to ask that question. It was just a given that you're Greek. Now, is it that you speak Greek? Does that make you a Greek? A citizenship? What is it? Because there is, for the first time, even the mayor yesterday said 1/3 of this island's population isn't quote-unquote Greek, whatever that means. Although they probably don't know, because everybody speaks Greek by now. I mean, Albanian is the other third, right? It doesn't have to be. It could be Russian or Polish, but since you're living here, you know better.
Actually, a field, and not just a field in terms of grass, but also a field as a metaphor. And that when I was adopted, I had birth documents that I never knew I had, for example. I was always told that they had been burned in in a fire, with an orphanage in which I'd stayed had been destroyed. This turned out to be a myth. And I found the documents later on, and they were full of all these empty spaces, meaning that there were no answers. So when I think about home, it's a place that is an empty space where there are no answers. It's a field of speculation. Speculation, which is different for me than imagination. Imagination to me seems too luxurious. So that, in thinking about, family, thinking about names, thinking about nation even, as a field, it's a necessary act of trying to speculate on what might be possible.
For me, what kind of language is your mother tongue? That is a language with which you dare to turn it upside down, to use the language to make jokes, to do something wrong to this language. And there's only one person who dare to write wrongly in other languages. That's Ezra Pound, as Anastassis told us yesterday. So for a second language, when I try to use the second language, I try to write it correctly. although it's beyond my ability, but I tried. I tried to write it correctly, to follow the grammar. So it means whenever I try to follow the grammar, it means that I'm writing in a foreign language. So I think this is also give me some hints when I wrote this essay, that sometimes when we think about home, then what is home? When you try to follow the grammar of home, it means this is not your home.
And I realize that that is all about home as well, that home is about smallness, which is one of the things I was trying to explore in this essay, that home is a small place. It's about small things and small beliefs where we're relieved of that burdenness of largeness that the world kind of thrusts on us, that we have to be large people, we have to have large thoughts, we have to have large, broad-minded beliefs. And I think sometimes you can rest in the fact that, you know, in some ways we are small-minded, we are small people, and sometimes there's nothing wrong with that. And of course I realize, again, because I'm such a conflicted person, the dangers of that. Because even in my writing where I celebrate so many small things about Jamaica, those small things become dangerous things. Those small-mindedness is...
The word home means a place of destination, a place where one seeks to arrive. Whether we actually ever do arrive there, with our memories of what we believe home has been, is another question. So for me, home is the possibility of a completion, of a circle that is able to be closed on our earliest memories, our earliest years, our earliest dreams. What we dream is to leave home, to go into the world. And once we're in that world, we dream only of returning home, of making a home in the world, coming back to the home that once was. The home that we imagine is never the home we return to. It's impossible. So we create in our imaginations the home that was, we write about it, we recover, as we say, the memories of that home, however close to the facts they are or not, however invented they are or not. And we seek always to keep moving toward that destination, that place that we imagine will be like the home that we once left.
So the concept of home could be both complicated and simple. If we talk about home in a simple sense, then it's just somewhere you can stay, you can sleep. If we talk it in a complicated sense, it means a home, then you have to talk about its values, and it's your neighbors, the fences, the walls, and all of these things make home, make the concept of home.
The word home is a word that contains ambiguities and ambivalences for me.
Beauty of the word home, or it's like the word love, that it can never be defined, you can never put borders to it. It's full of possibilities. Even when we have it, it can never stand still. It's dynamic and it's exciting. In a sense, with beauty and with home and with love, the beauty is that we're always trying to fill some kind of loss, even if it's only an imaginary loss. Perhaps it's not because we've lost something in particular. I mean, there are people who are homeless, and there are people who've never had love, but I think it's part of our condition as human beings to always be seeking for this promise of love and of home. So, I think those ideas are interconnected. Of course, it becomes even much more intense when we lose a loved one in a real sense, or when we are forced away from our our homes. So something that it belongs to being human is accentuated. But it's, I think it's something that defines the human condition.
And so thinking about the search for home as a syntax that can unite all these different places, all these different kinship bonds together, sources that might be known or unknown, is really what I think the form of the dream is about.
As a writer, what is home for me, it is my manuscript. I mean, this is the place where I live, which is my place, my home. A kind of small paradise, but on the other hand, it is also a small inferno. I mean, it's a place where you feel like you're imprisoned somehow. And in order to escape, you have to dig up through your writing, through your text, etc., in order to get out into the light. So you're in so home is something beautiful, and it is something dark as well. It has two faces.
I can't nail down a real home because I lived in so many different places. Having been born in California, high school in Canada, grade school in Greece, university in the States, and moving all the time. For a long time I had specific visions of homes, which were specific physical places, but over time those places have changed as well, and I suppose in 5 years it'll be a different concept of a home. I think right now, after this seminar discussion, I think my grandfather's house is the only remaining structure that I can attach a sentimental value to and say this is home, which is in Athens.
I come back home, same like the birds, they're coming to the nest, always the same place, every year. So I come back also the same way, because I love this. Τι άλλο να πούμε, δεν ξέρω.
Home means for me the place where I'm not foreign, where I'm not strange, where I don't have to explain, where I'm of a like mind, where I'm at ease. Not necessarily in my own country, not necessarily in my own people, but people of a like mind. Or a place of possibility of stopping for a while, gathering oneself together, and then going on further, or maybe returning to one's own place again, going back to where you came from. The going away from places and the return to places, two sides of the same coin.
For me, home is, it is where I need and cannot do away with. Home is everything. To me as an African woman, home is everything. Home is home, as we say. Home is where, when you fail, as we have in a saying, you can return to, and home is big enough to contain even your failure and your shame. That is home to me.
Watching hours to pick moments, I was envious of those whom I watched talking about homeland time and again. While holding stray bullets in my palm, I found on my balcony during the fighting days.